Good morning. Good morning. Am I on, Skip? Yeah, I am. Okay. Well, as Bonnie said, I just got back from a little town called Ajijic outside of Guadalajara yesterday evening. And you're talking about laughing and how great it is to laugh. Friday night, I went to a class that was the last of a class that was being held. It's one of the Spanish classes down there. They had been studying the book, The 4 Laws of Prosperity by Edwin Gaines. But the instructor had us go through a thing of introducing ourselves because she wanted to teach us that we should be laughing at everything. So she did a little laughter yoga kind of a thing. It was really fun. So you said your name and then everybody went, ha, 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 just went into big laughter. And then she told us to tell something that we maybe had not achieved that week if we'd set a goal and we hadn't achieved it. And everybody laughed at that too. So it was kind of fun to get into the idea of laughing about whatever happens because, I mean, laugh, I thought I'd cry. What would be the difference? You could laugh instead. And I was thinking as Bonnie was talking earlier about the events that have been going on in this country in the last few months I'll paraphrase because I can't quote it directly, but from the Course in Miracles, it says that what man would use for evil, the Holy Spirit will use for good. Excuse me. So I like to think of that when something of this nature happens that we want to judge as evil, and we see it as evil, and we obviously believe that it's harming a number of people on a lot of levels, that there will be some good, that God, what you said was that you had to say was that God is good all the time. So all the time is all the time. That there is no spot where God is not. So I choose to believe when I hear and see these things happen in the world that it's more about my learning to see where is God in it. Where can I find something that is what I call the bless in the mess. So I invite you all to consider those things in your world, not only individually, but collectively as our country moves through these totally trying times. And the other thing I like to think about is that maybe we're reaching a breakdown. I see everything at the level of, not everything, but most of the time I'm able to see things at the level of metaphor. And I believe that the government or the country or a collective society is the same as everyone at the individual level. I mean, it's just we're all a hologram of the greater. And so the way that I perceive that in individual circumstances, oftentimes we have to get to a breakdown in order to get to the breakthrough that comes hopefully afterwards, that this can happen at a societal level and at a governmental level as well, that we can see ourselves at what we believe to be the deepest valley, and where we like to be on the mountaintops all the time, we forget that there's something between the two mountaintops. It's called the valley. It's like there's 12 hours of day and 12 hours of night, 12 hours of darkness, 12 hours of light, more or less, in any given 24 hours. Certainly this time of the year, that's the way it breaks down. And we oftentimes forget about the need that there is for us to be in the dark or to be in the valley or to have these trying times or the dark night of the soul in order to be at a level later where we've come through it. And all of us are old enough in this room, I think, most of us, maybe there's one or two that are in here that are younger, but most of us are old enough to have had enough dark nights of the soul to reflect back on and to realize, yeah, we got through it. We survived, we learned something from it, we took a lesson out of it, and maybe we see it coming faster the next time, or we're better able to handle it, or we understand more about the compassionate need for others that we probably didn't serve well at the time that it happened. Any of those possibilities are out there. So, whoops, where's this guy feeding the plant here? Oh, that reminds me, I forgot to bring up with me, but one of the things I was going to show you guys, just for the laughter of it, was the dog at the house where I was staying in Mexico ate my boarding pass. And I had set it on top of my stuff in front of the front door, and when I came back, it was all chewed like this, looking like this. And I brought it. I thought, well, that would give us all a laugh, but it's in my briefcase still. I forgot to bring it up here to say that I've always thought, especially when I was teaching way back in the days when I was teaching the public school system, where this idea that the dog ate your homework would have been a complete ruse, It actually might be something that could have happened because the dog ate the papers of my boarding pass. anyhow, as Bonnie was saying, the theme for the month is freedom in a world that works for everyone. So the title of my talk today is Stay in Your Own Lane. And actually, I was kind of proud of myself. This is the first time in a long time I got the title to the secretary to put it in the newsletter before I actually was speaking. Last week, I think one of the quotes that Bonnie talked to you about is what I really wanted to speak about, which is Ernest Holmes' phrase that we have liberty but without license. We have liberty but without license, which means that our freedom starts with us but stops when it hits the other guy's rights. So that there's no infringement on others. And I saw this as, when I heard the theme, that the freedom in a world that works for everyone, that this is where the focus needed to be of my talk, is about how do we have the freedom that we want to have, but without taking license away from others' rights and others' freedoms. And I remembered the line that I just titled my talk out of, which is Stay in Your Own Lane. Do you all know who Iyanla Vanzant is? Iyanla Vanzant? Okay, a few heads shaking yes, some shaking no. Iyanla Vanzant is a spiritual thought leader. She's been on Oprah many times. She came up from, birth of an alcoholic mother, born in a taxi because I guess her mama was maybe too drunk to get the feeling of the birth pains, and so she didn't get to the hospital. And Iyanla was an orphan at the age of 2 because her mother died of breast cancer. And so she lived a life of a poor black child in New York City, but ultimately managed to pull herself out of all of those things and went on to graduate summa cum laude from Medgar Evers College and become an attorney and a public defender, and ultimately just moved out of the world of that sort of life into being a spiritual teacher. I think one of her more recent books is that I haven't read yet, but it's called Peace, P-E-A-C-E, in the Broken Pieces, P-I-E-C-E-S. So this is really what has been her ministry, is really that her mess is the message, her life is the message, where she does her best, in particular, to inspire black women to really move beyond a lot of the circumstances and a lot of the situations that they would perhaps find themselves in. And what she teaches is it's all about what you perceive and what you believe, that you may choose to see it differently. So the quote from Iyanla Vanzant is about staying in your own lane. And since I can't remember it all exactly, even though it's simple, I'll look it up here so that I can read it to you. So this idea of staying in your own lane and using the roadway as the metaphor, and maybe that's how you all chose the song, I don't know, but it's always perfect no matter what, but maybe they had the advantage of knowing something about the title today. Stay in your own lane, stay in your car, in your lane, on your road, in your world. Don't be minding other people's spiritual business. Stay in your car, in your lane, on your road, in your world. Iyanla Vanzant. So when we stay in our car and in our own lane and we're moving along, what are some of the things that maybe we're doing that I'd like to talk about? Now, we can belabor this metaphor. I can belabor it, and you guys can probably think of a lot of other things besides what I might mention today. But I think that one of the things that we're doing right away is we're taking 100% responsibility for that vehicle that we're driving. That our conduction on the roadway is up to us. And we are being held in that place as we are holding others in that place. So not only are we taking responsibility for what we're doing and how we're behaving and how we're driving, but we're also allowing other people on the road and trusting that they will take responsibility for how they're doing their driving. We're not jumping across into the other guy's lane to say, hey, you missed making a signal back there. Or, it's up to us to do our part and kind of let the others do theirs. And when you think about it, on the roadways. I remember being here one time when Bonnie had a slide up on the screen. Was it the 405 in California? Just in total gridlock, whether it be 6, 8 lanes wide, something like that she had up on the screen. And here it is, all these people that are in some similar destination in different lanes, but they're all managing to move in the direction that they wanted to go without getting in too much trouble with each other. So when you think about it in the world of driving and roadways as a metaphor for the sort of microcosm of freedom in the world that works for everyone. But the idea about staying in our own lane comes from this 100% responsibility, and these are the things that Ilana also talks about too. And one of the other things that I think we are often required to do, and I invite you to practice this more often, is to forgive the other driver. To forgive ourselves, you know, you make a little boo-boo. Oops, I almost ran that stop sign, or whatever is coming in your way of your driving out on the road where you might have realized, well, I'm taking 100% responsibility here, so I recognize that I could have done that differently, or I should have signaled sooner, or any number of things. I mean, am I the only one that drives like that I have to realize that I maybe loused up something? So it's about forgiving yourself, but it's about forgiving others. And I've certainly had a couple of experiences just yesterday, just getting back across the border and coming through El Paso. There was apparently some sort of event that was getting out at the convention center as we were coming up Santa Fe to get to the interstate. And there was a construction thing. There's one part of the road is all blocked off, so there's one lane only going northward, I guess it'd be. And people are trying to get out of this thing at the convention center, so they're trying to bump into the northbound traffic by turning left. Well, the traffic's all stopped up farther north because there's only one lane. So they're trying to turn left, and then they end up blocking the intersection. Now, I wasn't driving, but I remember thinking, oh, if I were driving, I think I'd turn and go another way. But there we were, so we were in our lane, trying to stay in our lane, and other people trying to get into our lane. And what do? You know, this 100% responsibility is not about either blaming or taking blame when you want to think. So if I put it down to the metaphor of driving, I'm not going to blame the guy that's driving the car for not turning like I might have. And I'm not going to blame the people in front who are trying to cut in. They're just trying to make their way somewhere, and who knows what their world is about. And I was planning to get home as soon as I possibly could because I, believe it or not, had a dinner engagement. And so I'm sitting there thinking, well, I'm pretty frustrated by this, but maybe I should practice what I preach. Let's just breathe deeply and accept this and forgive the situation, forgive the other people, forgive myself, just allow it to be. So if there's no taking or receive, and no taking of blame and no putting of blame, then what's left? Some sort of acceptance, forgiveness, whatever you want to call it, but it's about just surrendering to the moment so that we can be available for the moment. Because all this stuff sort of takes us out. You know, the Course in Miracles says you can have either grievances or miracles. You can't have both because they're sort of like, one supplants the other. So I could choose to keep my grievances. That guy and that SOB, and when he did, I could choose to keep those. But then they're going to take me out of my availability for the moment because I'm busy, rehashing what happened and maybe rehearsing what I would have done differently. All of that is in the way of being available for the present moment, in which case I could not be paying attention to the road and end up in a bigger mess, So sometimes that happens to us in our lives, not just metaphorically, right? And one of the other things that I think that we do that's a part of this process, and this is kind of what Bonnie was alluding to. I actually watched your video yesterday afternoon in the airport. Is that we, in this forgiveness process, we have to atone or make amends. We have to find ways to unify it. We have to find ways to integrate it. We have to find ways to make amends for it when it's our problem, when we created the problem. And I notice in the driving down where I stay, it's a small town, about 10,000 people, and most of the streets are cobblestone. But there's one road that's the main drag that they call the carretera, or they call the carretera. A lot of the gringos, they don't know how to pronounce it. But it's the little highway that goes through town. It's the only one that's asphalted. But it's still just two lanes, one lane each way. And a lot of stoplights along the road. And quite a bit of traffic because people prefer to use that road rather than the back streets that are cobblestone and difficult on your car and slower driving and all of that. And I've watched people there and how they are much more allowing or forgiving of the other drivers, that they will let other drivers in, or they will let somebody make the left turn in front of them instead of going right ahead on the green, because sometimes on the red light's the only time you get a chance to make a left turn. There's no left turn signal kinds of things. Not that kind of stoplights. So it's interesting to see how we might approach some of those in our own driving, and using the driving and the practice of the driving as a way of being conscious in our world, as ourselves internally, of how this could apply to other aspects of our lives. So we forgive by allowing whatever it is to happen. We atone, maybe we atone sometimes by slowing. Have you ever done this, where you slow down after you notice the cop and he didn't stop you? Where we kind of atone for our immediate sin there and drive more slowly, at least for a little while. At least for a little while. We make amends by allowing the other people to get in front of us, or we sort of buy some karma, maybe, by being a kinder, gentler driver, being what we call in the Course of Miracles the alternative, the presence of the alternative, which is what I think Bonnie was trying to talk about. The point I got from your story about the frustration with the insurance people was making a conscious intention to be the light in the midst of all of whatever seemed to be dark and frustrating and anger producing. Can we choose to be the alternative presence than the one that would have been otherwise expected, anticipated, or even projected upon us, perhaps? So we forgive, we atone, we make amends. Then there's some other questions about being out on the road and staying in your own lane, in your own car, in your own world, that I would like to bring up in this metaphor as well. And this goes for us individually as well as collectively as a society and maybe as a country. Are we road hogs? Are we taking up more than our lane? Or are we crowding the other lane? Are we driving too far over the edge? Are we making it less possible for the other folks to get their safe passage, or to get their access to all the goodies, whatever that might look like or sound like? So that's one of the questions that I would invite us to consider. Then there's other things that we encounter on the road as we drive in our lane. And one thing is road trash. And I would invite you to consider that road trash is the stuff that comes up in your life. That's, if you stop your car to pick up the road trash or pay attention to it, you're going to cause a bigger problem in your life and the lives of others. So I'm submitting to you that road trash is something to drive around, drive over, ignore. The more you focus on it, the more it's going to be there. Sometimes there's roadkill, right? And we can have a lot of compassion and sympathy for the situation of the animal that was killed, as well as the person who accidentally hit that animal. But there's nothing we can do except to accept it as reality, accept it as it is, and to understand that it happened. There's nothing we can do. We can't be at the effect of something we can have no effect upon. Because that choice, if we choose to be at the effect of these things, if we choose to be at the effect of Dallas and Minneapolis and Orlando and, Bangladesh and Turkey, all of these events are facts, but they're temporary. All facts are temporary. They change. Everything in the 3D world is going to change in form, for sure. And so the only thing that is eternal is what's in the internal. We turn inward. We, as Reverend Sandy would say, we dive deeper in those moments when things are problematic for us. We have to get closer. We have to dig deeper in to get that oneness with Spirit, to remember God is in all spots. There is no spot where God is not. Or to remember, to remind, change our minds. Get a new road. Find another mind. What was the line in the song, Mary Lynn?
Maybe find another kind of mind.
Maybe find another kind of mind. Yeah. That's not only reminding ourselves, but maybe finding another set of like-minded minds, like, coming to places like this to help us to be reminded of who we are and whose we are. And sometimes, there's a road accident. And those are the places where we really want to lay the blame. A friend of mine many years ago once had a car accident, and he had to go to driving school as part of his punishment from being at fault in the car accident. And he taught me something that I've never forgotten. He came back from that class and he says, "So do you know who's at fault in an accident?" And I said, "Well, no, unless you see the accident, He says, "Well, the person that's at fault is the one who last could have prevented it." And I have thought about that, literally as well as the metaphorical aspect of how we live, where oftentimes we could have changed something, we could have prevented something, we could have altered an outcome and chose not to. So did we take the right level of responsibility? Maybe not. So these are the questions that I'm offering up about, are we hogging the road? Are you stopping for the road trash or the roadkill? Are we blaming and not recognizing that, who's at fault at the accident and take what level of responsibility we could have? And then there's the road rage. That could very easily have been going on in that photo that Bonnie showed us of the 405, where we've got our own little individual world, we're in our own little car, we're in our own little lane, but it ain't moving. Or there's some situation up ahead that's, totally stopped the traffic. Or somebody cut us off, or any of the number of things that could cause you to be angry, I just don't think I'm the only one in the room here either that has that happen, where we, like the story I told you yesterday, I'm frustrated sitting in the car, not being the driver is one thing, I am a sort of a take charge kind of person, and then not having it go the way I wanted it to go. I mean, I could just have, and I was for a little while, so, and then it was just a matter of, well, there's a car in front, there's a car in back, there's a car on each side. Where are you going to go? What are you going to do? Can't even call Ghostbusters. So I have to decide for myself. Do I just want to keep this grievance, or could I choose peace instead? Like in Beth's reading about choosing to be at peace and finding what I love the word in her reading, the benediction of peace. Which, by the way, I think since she got messed up about which book it was, she actually was reading from This Thing Called You by Ernest Holmes. The reading that she did give us, This Thing Called You by Ernest Holmes, which, by the way, is about to be out in paperback in Spanish at Amazon. So watch for that if you have friends whose primary language is Spanish, because that's a very, very good book. Is there anyone in here that hasn't read it? Or, I'm sure they got it in the bookstore. Go get it. It's a very, very good entry-level sort of gateway book by Ernest Holmes to introduce the concepts of change your thinking, change your life. So if you have it at home, go read it some more. But this other lesson from the Course in Miracles that I want to read to you, I forgot my book. It's in the car, but this is the book in your bookstore, but I couldn't open it up because it's sealed up with plastic. But this is what the book looks like. Course in Miracles. It's a textbook, a manual, and a teacher's guide. But lesson 279 about freedom is what I wanted to read to you, and I would have gone to the car to get my book if I hadn't had it otherwise. It's called Creation's Freedom Promises My Own. And I'm going to change a couple words here just so it makes it easier to understand. The end of illusion is promised me because we are not abandoned by God's love. Only in illusion is there a time when when we appear to be in prison and await a future freedom if it were to be at all. Yet in reality, our illusions are gone with the truth established in their place. And now is freedom ours already. Should we wait in chains which have been severed for release? when God is actually offering us that freedom now. And when I read this, I think about a poem. Maybe you all had to learn it in high school like I did. It's by Richard Lovelace, the English poet, to Althea from prison. And there's some lines in the last stanza which says, "Stone walls do not a prison make, nor iron bars a cage." The idea, of course, being that there is never a prison of the mind unless you've self-created it. So this week I invite you to practice some homework while you're out driving the car. First of all, see if you can get out of the parking lot with this intention of consciousness. That'd be the first challenge for most of us. But when you're out there on your road, in your lane, in your car, driving, think about some of the things that we've discussed today. Are you forgiving? Are you amending? Are you atoning? Are you allowing yourself to get distracted by the trash or the roadkill and not pay enough attention to your focus of attention? And then, week after next, after you practice this coming week, then maybe week after next, see if you can take that level of forgiveness and amends and atonement into your personal life, because you're out there on the road with strangers you don't even know. So practice on them. You know, it's kind of like the medical guys that do the cadavers first, you know, so don't kill anybody. So go back to your personal life in another week and see if you can take that practice, if you've integrated that somewhat into your beingness, about instantly forgiving, taking 100% responsibility for your interpretation, for your desire, for your intention, and allow the other people to have theirs. You know, we believe in science of mind that you have to meet people where they are. The one thing they don't often tell us is sometimes you have to leave them there. Okay? So the idea of staying in your own lane is not stepping over into the other guy's lane to try to fix him, overhelp him. You know, any of these sort of codependent kinds of behaviors is stepping out of your lane, driving out of your lane into someone else's. So these are the things that oftentimes are more challenging at the personal level than at the level on the highway. But week after this coming week, when I'm in Mexico, you guys will be here practicing this in your on your home front. And by the way, our conference, the hotel is sold out. But if anybody still wants to come, we can find you a place to stay. We have 2 practitioner panels in English, 6 in Spanish, and 1 ordination panel that's taking place during the conference. So, yay! And, you know, like if you flunk out in Albuquerque, you could still come to Mexico. No, actually, I think you have to wait a period of time if something like that happens. But this Richard Lovelace poem about iron bars do not make a cage really is about what is the choice that I'm making? How am I choosing? Am I choosing peace instead? So you practice that freedom out on the road, where you take that freedom that Spirit has promised that I read to you about in the Course in Miracles lesson. Take the freedom that comes from God without taking license from others. It's liberty without license. Stay in your own lane. And I'd like to read you a little choice essay by Ilana Van Zandt to close the day with her as well. I live by choice, not by chance. To be motivated, not manipulated. To be useful, not used. To make changes, not excuses. To excel, not to compare. I choose self-esteem, not self-pity. I choose to listen to my inner voice and not to the random opinion of others. And so it is.